Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January 12th Airport Advisory Board meeting. We'll have a call to order right now. We'll do the roll call of the Airport Advisory Board, starting with you, sir.
Mark Beer, Tim Comfort,
Al Birch, Greg G. Feller,
Joan Genter.
Aaron Salzer.
and Brett Boyer is not here at this time, but he may show up, right?
We haven't heard from her.
Yeah, we're from. Okay, please, let's all stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Like to have the introductions of visitors starting in the back row with Mr. Norval.
J.R. Norvell with TO Engineers. Don Gary.
Okay.
Scott.
Linda.
Jeremy Davin.
Okay.
Dylan Saturday.
Literally. Airport.
Josh Ron.
Kim Stevens at airport.
Jim Walsh. Need your code tested this evening.
Elsa Brooks, CDA A. Currently airport.
Gary Traviato,
Steve Harrison, tenant. Mike Jankowski, Coeur d'Alene Airport Association.
Thank you very much. Looking at the agenda, do we see any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to, are there any changes to the agenda? I believe there was a conversation about moving the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association up sooner. If that would be all right with you guys, unless you'd rather wait till the end, Harry and Elizabeth.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
I have a short, relatively short presentation.
okay, cool. All right, we'll leave it where it's at.
Okay.
Because I do plan to take some comment on some of these things as we go through, okay?
One item is, today, about an hour ago, we found that 13 will no longer need to be discussed. Okay, so it can be full.
Okay,
Let's change that to the agenda.
13 was the future RFP for the South Ramp.
There's been changes in people, so they changed their minds.
Okay, I call for approval of minutes of the previous meeting. Yes, sir.
I would like to make a comment
Yes, sir.
on the meeting minutes. I just noticed it this afternoon with my coffee. Under minimum standards, I think it should be vice chairwoman Genter, not chairwoman.
Oh, good point.
See, I actually agree.
I wrote it too.
So if we change that to vice chair, I move that we approve.
I second as approved. I
Good.
mean, as amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next on the agenda is elect the advisory board chair for 2022. Open for nominations.
I would like to nominate another term for Greg G. Feller.
Fails for lack of a second.
Do I hear?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay, are there any other nominations? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Call for the elect of advisory board vice chair. For nominations?
Nominate Joan Genter. Okay. I second that.
Any other nominations? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Congratulations, Joan.
Thank you. Congratulations, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the discussion of the AWOS.
So the association sent the commissioners a letter about a month and a half ago. I wrote a response letter and requested, actually more than about a week after the letter was sent. And then I spent the last 3 weeks trying to meet, sending it back and forth between commissioners to try to get permission from them to send it out. I believe everybody should have a copy of it. Just reiterating the fact that we don't have access to the AWOS. It sits in our building, but we've been expressly told, do not touch it. Do not do anything with it. If it's on fire, you can put it out, but beyond that, don't even touch it. We have no camera and no recording system on it. There's no telephones like the old one had. There's none of that that exists on our AOS today. And so, and from talking with Robert Tickner, who led the last push to be able to modify it, the restricting party is not the FAA, it's actually the National Weather Service, because they want to restrict any remarks on that machine to the weather only. And so I don't know what, I've already tried this 3 times, as I said, I got nowhere. So.
Coeur d'Alene Airport Association meeting, Leslie Duncan was looking into it on her end as well. Let's see what she comes back with.
Yeah,
Has she found anything out then, or is it kind of like where it stands right now, is that there will be no changes?
and that's as far as I know. I have not spoken to her specifically about this, so.
Okay. Anything else to discuss regarding the AWAS?
Rick, can I make a
You
comment?
can make one comment.
My discussion is germane to this conversation, so can I?
I'll let, you know, technically I shouldn't, but I will.
Okay.
Yeah, go right ahead, Mike. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to do is kind of have a more collaborative, just, you know, conversation.
Understood, and I appreciate that, and I think the association appreciates that also. My name is Mike Nkosky. I'm one of the board of directors of the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association, and relative to Stephen's opening remarks there, we have a response to that January 6th letter that he's talking about. So I'd like to just share that with everybody. Let me get my readers on here.
Is that the one that was sent regarding?
Well, it's the last one that the one that you're talking about.
We sent this letter on January 6th.
Okay, and that's what we have.
Oh, but you have not sent a letter back.
No, I have a
Okay,
copy of
okay.
this here, in fact. or
Please
the
try to-
secretary.
Can you try to limit it, Mike, to like, 3 minutes?
Okay, well, I think I can get through that.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get going. Thank you for the opportunity to continue the discussion of our AWAS. The pilots at the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association represent over 100 years of flight experience, comprised of fixed wing, rotor wing aviators with backgrounds in private, corporate, charter, instructional, law enforcement, and FAA flying. The intent of our association is not to just complain, but to provide actual answers to critical issues like this. Our research included reviews of FAA regulations, advisory circulars, NTSB reports, and academic studies. Interviews were made with providers of private AWASs and with airport directors. We believe we have a reasonable solution. So let's talk reality. Last weekend, a pilot left a remote area which had no internet or cell phone coverage or any other method to check NOTAMs and headed to Coeur d'Alene. 10 miles from the airport, he dialed in the AWAS on his aircraft radio. There was no mention of a closed runway. So guess what? He landed on the snow-covered runway 20. Just listening to our CTAF, and you'll realize that the majority of pilots entering our airspace have not researched for NOTAMs for one reason or another. Last fall, a very experienced flight instructor and aviation college professor came into our airspace from a remote area with no internet or cell phone service. Tried to communicate on 122.8, but there was a temporary tower on a different frequency. Thanks to Shane Rogers of No Limit Aviation in providing the tower crew with an iPad and software, the controller was able to see her plane on the screen and advised her of the tower. The simple addition to the broadcast would have saved what could have been accidents in both of these situations. The bottom line is that many small aircraft don't have fancy onboard devices to check NOTAMs, or may be in the area where modern technology is not accessible. So a real life example, here's how an actual short flight might work from our airport. The pilot finds the weather and the aircraft good for a quick tour around the lake. So he hops into his trusty aircraft, starts it and dials in the AWAS. As the engine is warming, the aircraft is taxied into the wind favored runway and pilot announces departure on 122.8, all fine and dandy, unless that runway is closed. Or a temporary tower was installed overnight. In best case, no harm is done. In worst case, lives may be lost. This scenario is exactly what the airport director discussed in his response to the association's letter. But contrary to his statement, our solution would have specifically prevented the pilot from taking off without talking to the temporary tower and what was a very near mid-air collision. So I have some direct responses to that letter dated on the 6th. Number one, the association was not avoiding giving the name of any airport as referenced in our letter. For the purpose of our research, numerous airports were contacted. Sandpoint, along with one in Kansas, were examples of how an AWAS can and should work. And if you go to the Coeur d'Alene Flyers website, it's his Facebook page, you can actually hear what the Sandpoint AWAS does. And it's very informative. And it's something that the current technology allows. The FAA ATO Technical Operations was contacted for our research, and although the person in charge confirmed the FAA does not authorize adding to AWAS broadcast, he gave no credibility statements by the airport director that any quote upgrade to our system has affected that ability. It's also apparent that the FAA has ignored airports which have added to the broadcast on AWAS over the years for critical safety items, which is most likely what our airport did previously to the airport director's arrival and how other airports around the country still do. Number two, the airport director references the requirement of pilots to check NOTAMs from FAA provided sources. FAR 19200113 does require pilots to become familiar with NOTAMs before a flight, but there is no mandate as to where that information must be obtained, nor does it mention it must be an FAA provided source.
It has to be an approved source.
Which is only the FAA location, such two.
Tagging the NOTAM onto the end of an AWAS broadcast is the most user-friendly, efficient, and broadest method of accomplishing that, and maybe the only way it can be disseminated in some situations. The accident referenced by the airport director of 551 Golf Foxtrot 07 at our airport was totally different situation than a closed runway and is not material to this discussion. Apparently, someone from the airport staff incorrectly reported the amount of snow cover on the surface and a jet ran off the runway. In reality, the mistake by the airport in this incident was broadcast on the AWAS and was most likely the same as what was reported in the NOTAM. So there's no difference there. We're not suggesting the airport add runway conditions to every little NOTAM to the broadcast. It's the biggies like closed runways and temporary towers we are requesting to be added. Saying the AWAS requires, quote, continual maintenance seems a little extreme, and that indicates that it requires a technician to be on site 24/7, 365 days a year. Using Sandpoint as an example, the airport director reports their AWAS requires little maintenance, and they dedicate a very small portion of their budget to the system, which is on a private contract.
You gotta wrap it up. I mean,
You know, I've got just a little bit
Okay.
here and I got the punchline
go
coming,
around,
okay?
yeah.
So just be a little bit patient here. This is an important issue.
It
It regards
is.
airport safety.
You know, but here's the deal. I mean, you can go ahead and finish.
Okay, good. Number four, our question as to why notification of the AWAS broadcasts were made before the airport director's arrival but are no longer made still hasn't been answered. The director states he contacted Robert Tickner, the safety team manager at the Spokane FD at FISTO, whom we have worked with on issues like preventing mid-air collisions in the Coeur d'Alene area. Robert is a great guy, but has no authority over the AWAS. Since he says the previous attempts at the FAA tech ops were in with those who have since retired, it might be worth a call to the new staff. Okay, so number five, and this is the final. Replacing our old system with a more modern one from 1 to 4 companies authorized by the FAA is certainly an option, as they seem to be working very well in over 1,300 other facilities across the US. 2019 study by the National Academics of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine reported 88% of airports in the US owning their own AWAS. For this very reason we're discussing, the FAA Airport Improvement Program will fund 90 to 95% of the cost of a new system, which is estimated to be about $100,000. Okay, if the airport can't come up with the remaining 5 to 10%, our association will start a fundraiser to pay for the remainder. Another option is to request the FAA to transfer the ownership of our the AWAS to the county, a procedure which has apparently worked for other airports. So, final paragraph. Counting on all pilots checking every NOTAM before every flight is simply unrealistic. I place an emphasis on NOTAMs during fire season. I want to know if I can stay away from those areas where the tankers are flying. Trying to make a point by endangering all pilots in our airspace as well as citizens on the ground is downright irresponsible. It's just common sense that this issue be fixed as quickly as possible. It can be done safely, economically, and it may very well save lives. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so if, to sum up, what I think I'm hearing is that our airport director says the current AWAS as it is will not be changed. It could be an action item to look at purchasing a new AWAS for around $100,000, making sure that he has the ability to man it and to operate and maintain it, and then find a way to find out the other 20 grand if they fund. I'm sorry, if they, yeah, they
Only be 5 to 10,000.
yeah, okay, right. Excuse my math. Okay, well, thank you very much. But right now, the AWAS stands as it is.
As I said, we are able to modify it.
Okay, I mean, yeah, okay. All right, let's go into, so the AWAS discussion is right now, it maintains, stays the way it is. That could be an action item down the road. What I'd really like to do is eventually have the airport association, the advisory board, I don't know what's legal, and the airport director all sit down and talk about all these things where we can sit here and say, you know what, what would it take to get the AWAS up, or what would it take to change it? I gotta respect what the airport director says, is if he doesn't have the manpower or the staff, you can't go to, you can't, if you can't get the money from the county, it's not gonna happen. Okay.
So, right, you could create, you as the board chair do have the right to make a committee,
Okay,
but if you wanted to, you could do that.
okay, let's worry about that there towards the end, how's that?
I'm just telling you.
Yeah, because the other thing I like to do on this committee is figure out, I'm tired of hearing that we are in front of the airport. To me, my hangar doors are open, people stop by, I don't chase people away, so it'd be nice to have that conversation too. Okay, that's my soapbox today. Minimum standard changes, action.
So we received 2 comments. One was from Steve Anderson and one was from the association. It should be in your packet. This is Steve Anderson's letter. There's 2 specific items. And then the other was from the association, which was a request to reopen the entire thing. So it's up to the board what to do.
Okay, does the board have any interest in reopening the 50-some pages of rules and standards and minimum standards and review that with the committee at this time? I don't.
Not
I
whatsoever.
don't, no, I'd just like to make a comment that my understanding was we had it open for practically 2 months.
Right.
And it didn't say that comments had to be only on the changes. It was comments on the document. So in essence, it really was open.
So there's, if you look at any kind of group like an airport, the county, anything like that, you could submit a request for a rule change at any time to any entity. That's standard practice throughout everything. It's no different than if the association had a specific problem that they wanted to do, they could submit similar to what Steve Anderson did and requested that we change these and these items. And we just merely hold on to that list until the next minimum standard item update.
Right.
Which could be next year, it could be 5 years from now, it could be 10 years from now. It's just merely an item.
Yeah.
So.
All right,
Kind of like that.
Can I
yes,
chime in? No, my email did say comments on the proposed change,
yes, it did.
Oh,
not
yeah.
the whole thing.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay,
sorry, I
So-
didn't read your email. I'm sorry.
well, and we really, I mean, for the most part, I think the comments were on the proposed changes from Mr. Anderson. So I'd like to, I'd like to push a little bit on this, Stephen, also, if I could, in regards to what, I think, Steve, if I don't cover everything you had there, let me know. But the county, page 10, Okay.
I don't have.
Okay.
I apologize.
Well, it says the county reserves the right to limit certain operations that are unsafe and limit that rate significant inefficiency of the airport.
It's right here, actually.
Yeah, we don't have 10.
It's page 9. I believe.
Oh, page
okay.
9. Okay, we have page 9.
What?
It kind of depended on which, because when I looked at it, it was on my page 10
Yeah,
also.
okay.
Okay.
Anyway, the airport director shall make a recommendation to the airport director shall make a recommendation to temporarily limit certain operations to the airport advisory board. The airport advisory board shall vote to approve, deny, or modify the recommendation based on the merits of each recommendation. All users affected may appeal the limit to the Board of County Commissioners. My comment is, why do we even need that in there?
So.
I mean, wouldn't the FAA step in if it was that bad?
So yes and no. The airport at any time has a right to limit those based upon those words as it allows under grant insurance. The comment that we technically have that authority today. The reason I pulled this up, and this is our NOTAM system that we can do. I can literally issue a closure NOTAM right now. This is our live system that limits that operation today. This establishes a procedure, a policy in place on how we determine that closure. I'm not saying it's for snow incident, but we're limiting to certain types of operation. And that's what concerns me is if we don't have that into place and we don't allow for that process to go through, it may cause problems later.
It's my recollection that this came up when we were talking about the drop zone guys.
Yeah.
And when there might be potential, and we said that the fairest way we could come up with in order to implement some sort of emergency was to have it identified, have the board vote on it, and then go from there.
Yeah.
Is that?
And that was, it's more responding to the specific comments in this that says,
Right.
well, we have that right today. I could issue that note now and limit student touch and goes, all sorts of different things on the airport. And there's no real ramifications behind it. There's no real due process for it. This provides a process and a place and how to do it.
So you're saying you have the right to do that right now if you wanted to?
Yes.
What would dictate that emergency? Like, what would be an emergency? Because I mean, straight from the FAA compliance manual says, not the sponsor is the authority, is the authority to approve or disapprove aeronautical restrictions based on safety and or efficiency of federally operated airports. So what would say that that's an emergency? Just because we got too many planes in and out of here, would that come right down from the ADO?
So the ADO doesn't have anything to say with how the operations of the airport should work. It's the funding, that kind of stuff is typically what they do. 139 inspectors have something to do with it. But this can vary if, under how this is written, as the example I provided a couple months ago. Say we have a fly-in that's the Northwest AOPA fly-in. Well, that's a couple thousand airplanes. We're gonna probably restrict, because every piece of ground that we have, we're gonna restrict touch and goes, we're gonna restrict student operations out of here, training in here. We may, if we can, realize that we may shut down our parachute operation because they may be full of parking spots of airplanes.
Well, I have my own.
If you have a
lease where I land.
if you have a lease, it's your land.
Right.
Yes. Well, and I really don't think, here's what would happen. If that came up, it's got to come to the advisory board. It has to be posted for how many days before we can meet. And then it has to be approved.
Yep.
And most likely, I would say most likely, at least as long as most of these members are here, we're going to get approval or work with the FAA on this too. I mean, we aren't going to discriminate against any class of business on this airport just because we think we can.
No, and the idea is like in that situation, you're gonna have, for 3 days, you're gonna have
Right.
1,000 airplanes coming to the field. Well,
Yeah.
if you try to throw student pilots into that and everything else in our traffic and all that, we're gonna probably bring a temporary tower in on our own those 3 days. And
Well-
just to do that.
I guess I was kind of hoping it'd be a real big situation. We could just drive down the taxi lane and tell them, hey, can you cool it for a little bit? But I guess sometimes you can't tell them that.
Sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that stays then. As a change. Unless anybody else has any comments at the board. Okay. Yeah, let's go to utilities, landscaping and design.
An action on that one.
No, it's really at the end is
Yeah.
you're either providing a recommendation to move forward with it as a plan, to modify
Yeah.
based on comments. Just varies on what you want to do.
Okay,
You're just really reviewing
Yeah.
the comments that were made.
yeah, let me hit on these, Aaron, and then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Discuss it again. All utilities, landscaping, design, all facilities requiring sanitary and or water service shall connect to a public water system. There was a conversation on whether or not private hangars could have porta potties, and what is your intent on that, sir?
So we didn't change this, but to state it, we don't require private hangars to connect to anything. If they want to, they can, but if they're a business operation, that's typically where it comes back to is, do you need it to, are you required to have it by code? Or are you required to have it to fulfill your operations? For example, say you're choosing, you have a hangar and you're choosing to operate a flight school out of it.
Right,
Well, they're a commercial entity now. You're not a private storage hangar anymore. You're a commercial business. You should have a bathroom. You should have all those things in there. And so if they're not, don't do those things, that creates a problem for us.
the other comment was, then do you request that that the tenant request where the porta potty goes, or can we just put them outside?
We request that they inform us
Okay.
typically, and there's only 3 or 4 porta potties that the airport doesn't control or Stancraft doesn't control. Actually, it's on 2. And most people work with us and put them behind their buildings. and things like that.
That satisfies the comments, I believe. Next up, bottom of page, what I have is 16. The county reserves the right to charge for all new facilities the cost of development for all utility infrastructure. There was a comment that you would not charge and then pass those costs on to the rest of the tenants. Or there was a comment that you would charge for the whole thing.
Yeah, so if we look at like the north side development area. Let me see if this is the picture. The north side development area. We are charging based upon square footage. We're mirroring our leases to match our minimum standards and our leases is what we're accomplishing. So for example, these hangar lots are paying to install the sewer line, the water line, gas, power, all of those items because they want to have hangars development. And so they're paying based upon the square footage of their leaseholds, that cost. And then the remainder, the other items, the county will hold until, based on the square footage there, until somebody leases that back.
Okay.
So it's based upon each lease document, that each lease would be how we identify. We actually identified, we've modified our lease and actually put a section in there that says how much is owed per lot. And most of them, it's just not, it's 0, it's not applicable. Because everything that's already been developed, it's already done, except for one section on the south side, southwest side. It's if they want to get sewer or sewer.
So what you're saying is that the individual hangar owners will bear the cost, but it's only for the cost that's apportioned to them.
Yes, it's a proportional amount to that.
Sound fair? That helps me. I have one more than Stephen.
Yep.
This one here was, I'd also like to note that Brett Boyer joined the meeting at 5:25 p.m.
Sorry, I'm on a
Okay.
meeting.
Well, I think it's for the minutes. Okay, so Brett, you brought this one up last time when you were, or a couple months ago, when you were skydiving in Hawaii. At no time shall the aircraft's engine be operated during the boarding process. And you were said that basically when you went skydiving over there, they had the engine running. And so I'd like to know why we have that in there.
So we had it as a safety concern for us, as if you have people that aren't familiar with airports, we prefer to keep an engine off as much as possible. You look at a skydiving operation, and this is generally operates a business that is safe, but these are not meant just for Jeremy. These are meant for anybody else that comes in and operates off the airport. So that's the thing is, we look at how we look at the next 5 people that operate.
Okay.
And so that's my concern is if we don't have something in here that choose to operate in a tighter location where she has been operating, it may cause issues there.
Okay, it wasn't something I'd die on my sword for, but I just thought if it's different in Hawaii, why would it be different here?
I think it's a general safety
Okay,
concern to make sure your engines are off when you're boarding passengers, et cetera. I mean, when you were in the Air Force, what did you guys do? Well, for uniform people, it's different, but,
I've gotten on and off jets with 8 engines running, so
well, I have too, but
if that's as a crew member, so.
yeah, that's different.
Is
So
it,
I can just chime in there, like, any skydiver has been in, on, or around aircraft for quite some time. I mean, that's one of the first things you're taught on the first day is aircraft safety. Any of these people come in that may not be aware of aircrafts and things like that are always with one of my instructors or anything like that. Additionally, the reason the skydivers aren't doing that, when we have leases on aircraft, especially turbine aircraft, you get charged for starts on those airplanes. You know, it just adds cost. To shut that airplane down, it's got to sit there on the ground, not running for 15 minutes before you start back up. That greatly decreases the efficiency of my operation. You know, and it's common practice throughout the world that skydivers load the airplane while the engines are running.
So maybe that could be modified somehow to state that the engines will be shut down while boarding unless the people on boarding are under positive control of the entity or, you know, whatever, somebody that knows what they're doing.
well, if I walk into one of your props, who's gonna get sick besides you?
That'd be me.
And
You know,
you're-
that's why we have waivers in place, you know, everyone signs a waiver before they get on there, release liability things.
Do they release the airport too?
They can, it's on the waiver. It's on our waiver already to release the airport of any wrongdoing.
I was over in Hawaii, I was working for a company that we haul tourists around the islands day in and day out, and we never shut the aircraft down during loading and unloading operations. Of course, we had a positive crew out there, but it's just like he said, they're all educated before they go out to the flight line, what to do and what not to do. So it's doable. There's no reason why we can't do it.
Well, the reason I brought it up, because then you go down the bottom of the page here and it says, oh, well, whatever it says you will operate FAA standards or whatever. So I mean, to be that way.
It's up to you as the board. If you want to change it to engine shall be shut off unless under positive control, we can, or you can.
I don't see any reason to have it in there, because it's already been mandated by the FAA, parachuting community, and everybody else.
Up to the board.
Yeah,
I think that by putting that in there, you start to assume some of that liability.
Up to the board. And what you want to do.
do you have a proposal, Aaron, or anyone, on how you'd like to reword that, or leave it as it is?
Jim, printed out?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't have that. We don't have that printed.
Oh,
We don't have it.
I printed it off. Send the bill to Steve for the paper.
Can you read it out loud to us? Please?
Item 2, it's on page 52. Item 2 says loading operations. A, at no time shall the aircraft's engine be operating during the boarding process. B, the parachute pilot in command shall ensure that all passengers are properly secured within the aircraft. End of. And so A would be the only one that's applicable here.
And if you look at the part I started at the bottom there, then,
Start, okay, aircraft, okay, then,
which I think covers it.
yeah, big B, skydiving flight operations, 1, standard field ops, A.
What page is that on again?
52. I love that number. Put a B in front of it, you got something really good. It's not a rock band or a drink. Right,
Right there.
yeah, and then Greg's talking about if you scroll down to the bold print. Right there. So you still have, yeah.
That's what I was talking about.
And then you say down, it
Scroll down further.
says aircraft operations.
Standard airfield operations. Aircraft operations shall be done in accordance with the FAA regulations, practices, and other relevant guidance. So does that cover motor running or not running, or what?
I don't remember. It's been
Okay.
too many months.
Okay.
Jeremy,
What's that?
if the FAA's, what the FAA's guidance, direction, regulation is
Just
upon
based
that.
on, everywhere I've been in the world, it's just common practice, the airplane runs, they're with an instructor, they're licensed skydivers, everyone signed the waiver. It's a release of liability for the airport, the county, the city, myself. It's just something that's done worldwide. And I've been skydiving for 23 years now. I've loaded thousands of aircraft with the airplane run.
So I guess the question to the board is, do we want to have the engines off or remove that from the service log? Before
As
then,
experience also, I think you guys are walking up the wrong tree here, just leave that as is. First of all, how you gonna enforce it? Second, who's gonna tell Forest Service they can't do a crew change with a helicopter running? It's no different than an airplane.
Okay.
So it just expands from there, so I think you guys are best just leaving it as is.
so striking that about the engine being off.
That's what I would do. It's already been,
Yeah.
That's all the comments I had, so I would entertain a motion. Yes, sir.
Is there a policy about any aircraft being loaded or unloaded with the engine being running that's already in the bylaws?
No.
Does anyone
There's
what's the
something-
difference between loading a 402 with two engines running
Right.
versus a skydiving airplane? The 402 coming from somebody's hangar is not gonna have positive control over 6
No.
people if he's actively in the cockpit with the aircraft running.
Sure.
So if you do one, you have to do that.
Right. Okay, so the suggestion is to remove that one item.
get rid of it if it was me.
Any other comments on these rules and standards? Okay, so
So
So we need a motion.
I'm looking for a motion to approve these with changes.
Right,
Your changes have to be made from the previous go. You had some syntax and things. Did you 2 months ago, did that get?
I think you took care of them, but I didn't.
We won't have updates or anything, so.
but we haven't changed it since the last meeting, so.
After the meeting, I think we talked, I gave you my changes and I think you made them.
Okay. So that syntax was done on that.
And it's been a while ago, I can't remember.
Well, it's in the minutes what you requested, I think, Brett.
Okay.
Trying to find the minutes of the last meeting, but I wasn't at. Okay. What did Brett ask for in there, just so we're clear?
You're looking for, the motion should either be to recommend making no changes, to recommend to the VOCC, that you make the changes that are presented here that you were doing.
Yes.
You're not truly approving them, the VOCC approves them.
Okay, right on.
It's-
I'm pretty sure we got them. All right.
So is there a motion to approve the changes for recommendation to the Cooney County Commissioners?
I'm not
I think we.
fully tracking what changes we're talking about.
Right, I was just gonna.
That's
ask
the problem
those-
I got.
The only change would be change from the red line document would stay the same. The only change would be that we take off the engine running. Well, then
Okay, so, yeah, then I would like to make a motion
No.
that we accept the changes as inputted by the director with the addition of on item 2, loading operations, we strike paragraph A, which says, at no time shall the aircraft engines be operated during the boarding process. We just strike it.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I think we've had it.
Now you know why we don't want to reopen it.
I know. All in favor?
Aye.
So the recommendation, Stephen, is they go as presented, except we'll remove the running aircraft.
Yep, we do that.
Now, the other thing, before we move on to this, I would encourage people, I know the association wanted to open up the whole document. I would encourage people to keep a list of that stuff and send it to the advisory board as well as to Stephen. And what we can do is save that in a little basket of stuff. And when it does come time to reopen those, we can review them. Because if we review them, let's say it opens up in 3 years or 2 years, we're gonna forget all the things we talked about. And so I think that we start that process of communication, we should be okay.
I think I make a comment about that.
Yes, sir.
If that's gonna happen, what I would recommend is, as you did, Steve, you list the item, what you feel is incorrect about it, and then propose language as well. That way we can, if there's not, when we review it eventually, we all remember what it is that actually wanted changing instead of, we don't like this section. Well, what was it? I don't know.
That was really good.
Steve, I think we answered most of your stuff. It may not have been the answer you wanted, but I think we got most of it out of your letter.
I feel like we've got a decent hearing.
Yeah, it may not be what you wanted, but it's close. Okay.
We're gonna still have a cover comment through.
Yeah, we will. 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. North side hangar height over 35 feet. Action.
So this is in our minimum standards, the advisory board has to approve anything over 35 feet in height. And what this is to ensure that we don't have odd structures being built on the airport, is why it's in there. And this is a facility on the north side. It's actually one individual who is requesting to build these 3 hangars. It's a lease on the north side. And it's basically an approval, needing approval or denial of this. The airport has no issue with this. It's set so far back, it clears all 7460 requirements.
Okay.
It's on the very north side of the new, what we call D6, which is the new thing behind Stancraft, the taxi lane up there. And it's running at about 42 feet is their peak height.
These two.
Those, all 3.
And they're just, they're square hangers.
They're just box hangers,
Okay.
one's a drive-through, this front one's the drive-through. These 2 are just straight pull-ins. And that's it.
Those little square rectangular things with a circle, were those swales or something?
Those are swales.
Okay, thank you.
Larger
Just
Yes, sir.
if I might, reviewing the history with, when we built our building, of course, it's a bit taller than that, but not,
How much?
it's 50. Yeah, but we ended up, the FAA claimed it was interfering with their old VOR, that I'd like to take a tractor out there and run over.
Well, but they also came back and said it's not.
Yeah, so these,
They're not. They're already shadowed by Stancraft, so they're gonna be shadowed by them.
yeah, that's a good point.
So there's no issue.
Well, it's not going to be directly behind Stancraft
It's-
until they build, but if they build more.
Yeah, it'll be at the back. It's part, one of the building 2 technically will be shadowed partly by their facility. As soon as Stancraft begins construction on building 3 of theirs, most of this will be shadowed.
So Tim, your building's higher already.
Yeah, and I had to turn it 10 degrees, which really torques me because every time I look at it.
And the VOR is going away someday, right?
Yeah, and it
They keep
turned out
playing
that-
with it.
it
Okay.
turned out the FAA was wrong.
Okay, cool.
But by that time, I already turned it over.
I'll accept the motion to approve this unless somebody else doesn't want to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve as submitted.
Second,
I'll second.
okay. I'll second. Discussion, any more discussion?
Just a question, how tall stand up?
It's like right around 35 feet or something like that. We may have, it may be slightly taller, I don't recall.
We have a motion, it's been seconded, all in favor to approve these letters?
Aye.
You. Airport fee discussion.
So this is just a heads up of what's coming forward in the next couple months, make sure everybody's aware. Right now, we're not planning on changing any fees except for our airport use fee, which only applies to transient aircraft. And then, we'll do our typical CPI adjustments for our rates. The problem is our CPI right now is running between 7% and 9%. Yes. We just did one recently that was at 8.5 or 8.5%. We haven't gotten the numbers yet, so we don't know what the increase is yet, but we're seeing significant CPI adjustments.
Huh. Well, Kim, I should have taken the money and ran before mine's adjusted July. Darn, okay.
The other thing is this vector, this is what we're talking about using as a collection system. Right now, if we switch to what we're talking about is a per 1,000 pounds, we really can't reliably require our fixed-based operator to do that. It's very challenging for us to get this data as well. So there would be, this is what we would hire an organization to do. And they've done a preliminary study, and at $350 per 1,000 or 4,000, it's this. We can go higher or lower. It just depends on what the board wants to do. From talking with them, they're in about 25 airports or so. 350 to 4 is pretty average for transient aircraft. And we're cutting it off at 8,000. It's not worth the energy to get forward.
So by cutting it off, you're saying 8,000 is this
8,000. Yeah.
so it's got to get above 8
8,000.
above.
Yep.
801.
What do you consider transient aircraft?
So if you provide us with tail numbers, we put the same caveat we did for heavy maintenance operations in it, we did for the airport use fee, that'll stay in there. And as long as you're providing us with the tail numbers, we can provide it to them and they don't bill.
So at this rate, how's that compared to what our current rates are?
We collected about $90,000 this year from this, and this will basically 1.5 times.
So on my aircraft, when I fly down to mid-size jet, fly down to California, most of them are 30, 35 bucks. With that 350 per 1,000 pounds, I'm 82.25.
Yep.
Are you really willing to start nickel and diming people because they'll go elsewhere?
It's up to the board, it's up to the board. If we want to go lower, we can. It's just, I would prefer to get this out of responsibility of the FBO.
And then if we do go lower, it makes a difference to these vector people on how much they're gonna charge or what percentage they want.
Yeah.
So right now, what's the discussion? Just that
It's
it's
just
out there?
It's just a heads up of what's coming down. And the board may choose not to change anything. It's up to the board. It's just something that we wanted to discuss.
Have we looked at other? And I'm imagining there are other businesses.
There's a couple out there. This is just one of the ones that are out here right now that I know of.
Okay.
And what's the problem with the FBO collecting it other than they don't like collecting it?
They don't like collecting this. But if we
But
also,
they send you a check every month, right?
yeah, but the thing is, if we switch to a per 1,000 pound weight limited weight, that'll be too hard for them to calculate. Because it'll vary by every year.
So they, yeah, vector just takes it by gross weight there or something? Or what?
Yep, they just look at the type of aircraft, the weight. That's all they do.
So these numbers, 350 and $4 per 1,000 pounds, where did those numbers come from?
They provided them. They said that's pretty average in what they're seeing.
So the thing is that it's okay to continue the discussion, but it could just say, we want to keep our fees where they're at. They may want more, a bigger percentage of the pie than they're climbing.
Yeah, and if we're gonna keep the fees as it is, what they are, my recommendation is we don't change what we're doing.
Okay.
But if you want to go down a path of this, I would recommend making the change away from the FBOs.
Not having the current fees in front of me, how would this affect the current, I mean, how does this compare to our current fee?
So like Aaron's aircraft that he flies is
20 in summer.
25 or something, 25, and it would go to about $80.
So you're like triple plus.
I know the fees that are proposed, but if the
Part
bar,
of that for-
But he's based here
yeah, you're in
Correct,
charge.
but that's just a,
Right, that's just using his as an
as an example.
example.
So where are we at with this discussion? Eventually we'll come on saying this is what,
We'll make, the airport, the staff will make a recommendation probably in April or March or something, whenever CPI comes out. And then we'll be at the next advisory board meeting to make to see what you guys want to do. And then it goes before the commission the following month. Most likely, if CPI holds, there will be a public hearing because it's greater than 3%. Just follow CPI.
so when you come up with that, is there a way to like compare ourselves to like Phelps Field or Spokane International or Lewiston or whoever else is like these fees?
The big ones that they're pointing to are other resort destination towns.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And you look at other resort destination towns, they're actually higher.
any way to take the 20% and incentivize it towards the Stancraft people? I mean, it looks expensive to me, but again,
They actually do all the collections, they do all the processing, and all they do is cut us a check.
right,
So whereas if, and keep in mind, this was when we got 2 FBOs is when we got this presentation. So that may change, it's just we wanted to have the conversation, even when we started talking about this agenda item, we still had 2 FBOs, so.
So if we go with this, the FBO will no longer be
They'll no
tracking
longer
that.
they'll no longer be responsible for it.
Okay, so what specifically is the problem right now?
So the big issue is making sure that they don't always get every aircraft, because it doesn't always come to them. They may,
if they don't buy something, if they don't go in and pay a facility fee or buy gas. Some of them do the tuck and roll, they roll onto the ramp, throw the door open, with the engines running, mind you. People get out, disappear into the weeds, and they take off. So there's your missing $25 to the airport because they didn't collect any fees on that deal. It sometimes happens that way, but if they're running a card,
yeah, as long as they're running,
it's an accounting issue, I think mostly, but.
as long as they're running a card, they'll collect it, but we have aircraft that are utilize the south ramp, we have aircraft that, they'll do, very quick time burns.
Life flights just pops into my head on that because they come and go without needing services. But do we really want to start nickel and dime those guys? I don't know.
Well, we aren't gonna take any action right now, but just a discussion of possibly looking at Vector, and eventually in a couple months, we'll look at landing fees, possibly an increase in landing fees.
Airport use fees for non-based tenants.
Airport use fees for non-based tenants. Okay.
So,
Staff reports.
yeah, so just so everybody where this was changed, since 13 John, that's that. So staff reports.
Oh, that was another.
So that was item 13.
Okay.
We had recently had, actually, Mr. Keller is one of the lots in there, but there was another lot that we had received 2 applications for at roughly the same time. And we did, as the airport, we were gonna do a request for proposal because they were both businesses on the field. And we wanted to provide, we weren't sure who was gonna be the best, so we were gonna do a small RFP to say, there's a 2 to 6 page document that said, so then say, what are you doing with this spot? What's gonna be best for the airport? That had changed due to some negotiations, it sounds like between those 2 parties, and now one is back out.
Staff reports.
So staff reports, a couple weeks ago, I had a meeting with Mr. Anderson about the just different items and things like that. One of the items that we started talking about and we've been hearing, there appears to be a misunderstanding of what was discussed about 220 and what it is. So what was discussed in the meeting is during the decoupling discussions, TO ran another wind analysis. And that wind analysis came back and said that 624 has greater than 95% wind coverage for all aircraft. 95% wind coverage is a major identifier for the FAA because at that point, they state you only need one runway. Doesn't matter about your operations count, doesn't matter about anything. It is identifying that 95% is you need one runway and one runway only. As 624 was in that wind study showed that it met all requirements for A through D category aircraft. That's all we need as our runway. The conversation was that and when we do our next master plan, we need to all be on the same page prior to that master plan in 2 to 3 years about how do we approach the FAA in the discussions about keeping 220. Because if the wind study stays this as it's been doing is shifting to support 624 more, then we need to be on the same page as keeping it as what's called a secondary runway. It is allowable, but if we're not on the same page and we don't have everything in the identify it up front as a problem, then we have issues. Is that your recollection for Tuesday?
No, that's accurate. That's what it was explained to me.
So, and there was a group, a comment's been going around that we want to abandon 220. That's not the case. We are trying to set up how do we work together to save it if that wind study doesn't shift back. So that was the big thing.
Save it, meaning, keep current funding
Keep current funding
towards it, yeah, okay.
From the FAA.
So that,
From the FAA rather than having to do it on our own.
yes, because if the FAA doesn't agree to continue, then it's necessary. The FAA looks at you at the airport and says, your options are is you can maintain it at your dime, which means the mill and overlays are our responsibility, the light maintenance, all those things. And if you look out after the next master plan, 220 is due for reconstruction. So it's at its life cycle period at that. So that's the next hurdle we're going to have to deal with in that master plan is most likely either listing that as a secondary runway and supporting it, which is why we are going to be pushing to start doing more tracking on operation counts and everything like that. And there's comments about why 220 was closed the last 2 weeks.
Right.
That's because it was covered, 1/3 of the entire runway was covered in ice. And we couldn't operate. We can't allow aircraft to operate on runways that are covered in ice. It's due to 139 requirements. Once it's an ice covered runway, we have to shut it down. And because we picked up most of this ice right before it froze, it went into our deep freeze. Our chemical doesn't work at that temperature. So we had to wait. And then on top of the other 8 inches of snow or 10 inches of snow we just picked up on top of the rain, we were peeling off we had about anywhere from 1 inch to 1/2 inch of ice on a good chunk of that runway.
So back in the day, I recall taking off on that when it was pure ice. So what's changed?
Requirements on our FAA requirements.
Okay.
So it has to do with our snow and ice control plan. Anytime we have ice, we were required to shut it down.
Thank you.
So moving into snow, just so everybody's aware, it looks like we've had about 50 inches of snow so far. So far, about 1/3 of our fleet is actually down. We've lost our primary blower, we've lost a loader, and we've lost our backup plow. The blower, it appears that basically the entire bearings on the main drive shaft just detonated, they failed. We hope to get it back up here in the next couple of weeks, but we may not. We have one backup blower, well, technically we have two backup blowers, but if we use our our true backup blower, it means we lose a loader, which means we have no loaders. Right now, our other loader it has the engine control unit down. It's failed on us, and mostly because, to be honest, it's sitting outside and it's an old unit.
Do you have money in the budget to replace it,
We're spending money.
For what?
We're spending money to fix it, yes,
but not to replace it?
not to replace it. So we're fixing that. Our backup plow. It was started fine through the preseason. We went to start it, just one turnover. So, so far we have spent about 20 to 25,000 just in de-ice alone this year. And that's solid de-icer. We've already blown through our budget on that as well. We've already blown through our entire overtime budget as well. So.
You have an equipment lease line item that you can go.
We do, and we're looking at adding one, probably finding one that has the same coupler that our equipment does. Is the problem.
Yeah.
And I know prior to Resort getting bought out, they had requested a loader, and it still hasn't shown up.
Because it's supply.
But it just can't get.
What other lightning news do you have for us, Stephen?
So I think everybody's aware that the FBO, we're down to one FBO on the field. Stancraft purchased Resort Aviation. So we are down to one FBO. I will let other people decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It does, there's some strong opinions in the room about that. So we'll see what happens as we go forward into the summer. So any questions?
Do they have a border patrol over there yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
It sounds like maybe next summer.
Okay, cool.
We've done our side of it. We've completed all of our paperwork. We're just waiting for a signature on that.
Do they intend to operate from both locations?
They're not allowed to operate from both locations.
Oh.
Yeah, we don't allow them to operate in both locations in the minimum standards.
So
what's happening?
what happens? So I'm presuming that Stancraft, when they bought out Resort, bought,
The buildings too.
okay,
They are looking to sell or lease them to a different party. We know of who it is that they're in negotiations with, but I don't think they're ready to say who's.
They can not use it for aircraft storage. It's a different spot.
It's a different spot.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Also, we're next month, we'll actually have our 139 inspection from the FAA. It'll be the other part of the month. It is interesting that they're sending 4 of them out there. It must be their training time. They have a bunch of new cert inspectors out here that's in the area now. We also sent out some hangar notices to people that needed to build. We have a few vacant lots that haven't had, never built anything on them in the past year or so. We sent out notification that basically said you have to be submitted paperwork into the building department no later than the 31st. And it was begin construction, Kim, was it May? End of May. So if they don't, we'll begin terminating leases.
So the people that have at least now, are they paying the?
They're paying rent, yep.
Oh my goodness, okay.
But we have a waiting list of people that still want to build hangars. We're trying to squeeze people into different locations, and we needed to do this.
Okay.
So
Stephen, I have a question real quick. How many does that affect on your work?
how many people did we send out notice out? 8 to 10. Remember. And the last thing I have is update before we get into the engineer's report is I've been reached out to by the Commemorative Air Force about hosting another Air Expo. We've been talking with Stancraft as they now own the resort facilities about hosting it over there. We've talked to people that are interested in leasing it, they would still be interested in hosting in that facility as well. But what my goal is to have one or two members of the advisory board sit on the planning committee with myself, the association put forth a couple names. Kirk with Coeur d'Alene Aviation and Maintenance is requested to sit on the group as well. And then there may be a few other people that we would pull in from the rest of the airport as well to just help plan the event.
Great.
So if anybody wants to volunteer.
Any board members here? Joe will?
John?
Anybody else?
I'll think about it.
Yes.
How long?
When would we be looking at, when are they?
They're looking in the either second or third week of July.
Okay, so that's prime efficiency.
We can help plan and then just don't go against.
There you go. That's a good solution.
And Harry, you submitted 2 names, correct?
Yes.
You submitted 2 names already to Stephen. Yeah. Okay, cool. Very good.
You volunteered? Okay.
Yeah, I see his arm is up there. It's up there.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll probably start doing some planning meetings here towards the end of this month, just to get an initial kickoff of what the goal is and everything like that. Cool.
My request is that you request private aircraft, we need to have better security.
I wanted to pull the association in and help with that.
Oh, walk across the-
I'm picky,
They did it all the time back in the
right?
barnstorming days.
Pull up some pedo tubes.
My aluminum's thinner than a beer can, so.
So moving into the engineer, what's going on in construction wise, taxi D North design and construction is completed mostly. We're still having issues with grass and that'll sit out for a while, but that's basically where we're sitting. You got anything to add on there? Nope.
There's the grass freeze.
It's a long story. Runway decoupling has been officially renamed to runway 624 rehab and Bravo for construction. It's been, Teal and myself are currently in negotiations on a fee. It's just came back from us from our independent fee review, which is part of the federal process that's required. Our burner fence is done. We're in a closeout almost, or basically closeout. Administration building and solar mobile building, we're in bidding. Bidding that again this year to see if we get a better pricing. The FAA still has money, about $750,000 that they plan on putting into the SRE building. We were also slated to get about $359,000 of additional funding this year as part of the bipartisan and
Group, partisan money funding thing.
funding, yes, there you go. Infrastructure. As part of that for this fiscal year, we may get more, we're also slated to get additional money for the Bravo 4 will pay for that. And we also will have a construction project this year of relocating the beacon.
This is Bravo 4 here then?
Yes, that is Bravo 4.
Okay.
Bravo 4 is will shift the midpoint connector. Depending on what construction is being requested, Stancraft is requesting to expand their ramp. We may or may not have to actually close D ahead of schedule. We don't know. We're trying to finagle with the FAA about what does aligning a taxiway mean, and we're not getting great answers from them.
And I'll just speak up on that. The reason I want to keep Delta is I like to have 2 full crossings on the runway. So until we extend down on the south side of 624,
To Fox, right?
Fox down and connecting the threshold, and so that we have a crossing where right where your fingers are.
No, other way.
Other way. So until we connect there, and have a crossing at that end, I don't want to get rid of the crossing because those are the only 2 crossings on the.
with the Gulf Stream Road, that should break ground here next April-ish. Infinite apron utility expansion, so that's a location we're trying to shove hangers into. And we're currently working with about 7 different people to try to do that. We're trying to build consensus on what that would look like and how that would work. It may end up being where we do a similar RFP process, put that out to one individual and say, develop it this little area however you want, and come back to us when you have a plan.
Okay.
Build it up that way. We're running into the cost of infrastructure for how few these hangars are and how small these hangars are is extremely high. It adds $70,000 to $90,000 just because of how some of the runs that are involved. They're just not good runs in this area. It was never designed to do what we're trying to do.
What would you have, a sub taxiway out in front then to join into Alpha someplace?
No, you'd reuse the connection that's already there, that goes into the infinite electronics area.
Okay.
That would still remain, you close the other one. That doesn't mean.
Cool.
So we've already submitted applications for rehabilitation as well as the design portion of 624 and the construction is Bravo 4, as well as the electrical work that we anticipate that was signed by the commission yesterday. Other stuff, we're in the process of a sewer inventory, which we actually turned out to be a pretty lucky thing. We found out when they were jetting the system and doing the camera work, we had a couple of locations backfill into the hangars, but the reason why was there was a blockage. So if we hadn't have been doing this, and of course, this is actually in our main line area where this was located at, eventually this would have caused such a big issue, our entire system would have blocked up. And it was on one of our main lines, so into our H3 lift station, our H4 lift station.
For big time rotor.
Yes.
Why do we own a sewer again?
And trust me, I'm trying to get out of it. Trying to get out of it alive. So we are still working on the ATC planning study. It's a pretty small study that we're just trying to pull everything together, collect data right now and get everything set up. Any letters anybody was willing to write in support of having an air traffic control tower, we're happy to accept those because it helps back up our case of that. So Tim?
Yes, sir. Probably Stancraft too, huh? What's this, if CAD X is appropriate for Northeast area, what's CAD X?
So it's categorical exclusion. It means that we don't have to do an environmental assessment on areas.
Good.
And so anytime we try to do any construction in this airport, we have to do what's called a CAD X or environmental assessment to determine whether there's any impacts.
Okay.
And so even the south area, the southwest area, our CAD X is actually close to running out, and we're gonna have to resubmit it, even though there's only a couple of hanger lots left. It's the same with any other location on the field. We have to do a CAD X to determine whether the FAA will environmentally clear the location.
It's the lowest level of documentation for environmental clearance accepted by the FAA.
We have multiple hangars doing 7460.
Yeah, I saw that. AJR, here's your chance to shine. There's 6 AIP projects you're communicating on. What are they?
6 of them that he communicated.
No, your community yearly reporting forms for AIP 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, and 52.
Which we found out 3 of those don't need any reporting on.
Okay.
Okay. Because they're the CARES money act.
Oh, okay.
So it was.
It was nice to see that there were projects that are going on. I want to put you on the spot.
Steven saved it.
Better talk to Corey about that next time, huh? All right, thank you, Stephen. Okay. Coeur d'Alene Airport Association update.
I think what we did, we assumed that Mike's presentation was actually the CDAA position on that, and that was why. So thank you for giving us consideration for the extra minutes, because that was the formal CDAA presentation.
Well, now that Nancy Jones is retired, I guess I could break the rules, because technically in our training, we aren't supposed to allow that stuff, right?
She's retired, she left the county.
Oh, she left the county, but okay. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mike, for your understanding. Okay. We'll do the public, let's go this way first of all. So we talked about forming a committee, and I'd like to have the association and the pilot community forward a couple names to Stephen or Linda or Kim or me, talking about a group where we can sit down and just have a conversation of what's going on. I mean, I hear that, you know, we don't plow 220 because we're trying to get rid of it, which is not true, but there was the ice problem. But it'd be kind of nice if we just get some of that, what I hear as negativity out in the open, and have an opportunity to have a conversation about that. So that may fall like a lead balloon, but if people are interested in being part of that, I'd appreciate them. Let Stephen know, and a couple of members of the advisory board. I think that's legal.
But you have the right to form as any committee you want.
That's the committee I want to form. With a couple people from the advisory board and 3 or 4 from the pilot community. I'd like to see a broad brush of the pilot community. So, okay, Aaron.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Good, Aaron's gonna do it. And then Harry, if you could get us a couple names, appreciate that. Looks like we got a couple that work on the Air Expo too. And, how do we get the word out to the rest of the people?
So we can send an email out just saying if we want to establish a time, whenever, it could be Wednesday, say Wednesday, the same Wednesday at 10 o'clock.
Good.
You just do an informal meeting and discuss, and no real set agenda. It's just, what do you want to talk about? And if there's some item that we want to do, we can send it out. We do have a significant email list through our stuff.
So when that group meets, do we have, is it part of the open meeting law?
So as long as there's not a quorum of the advisory board, you're fine. So as long as there's not 4 of you in the same room,
right,
you're fine.
Good.
Cool.
I want to be part of that too.
We may record it just as it's a good record keeping for us. Just because it's in a committee of the board, we may actually record it, and we may, if there's any specific items that we want to talk about, or any specific items that the association wants to talk about, or somebody else wants to talk about, we may have an agenda. But we'll save those, and we'll keep it as we work on.
So with, yeah, I mean, and then we can set ground rules like decouplling the 220, that ship is probably set, right?
Unfortunately, it is. It was decided in the master plan.
Okay, thank you. So if anybody's interested, please let Stephen know and we'll get something set up. 10 o'clock at Trails End Brewery or someplace like that there. Yes, I can't say that. Okay, you did. Okay, public comment.
Yeah, I got something.
Yes, sir.
Mr.
So get over there then.
Okay, looking at.
Go ahead.
Way I understand things are going long term now, we're thinking years, couple of, I probably won't be around, but apparently Steve says we need 20 acres of this piece of property right here, and it's very expensive. He said something like 50,000 an acre, which I think is ridiculous. I think we should offer 10,000 an acre, and I don't think we need 20 acres. Because I think if you build a terminal and you put the parking under the terminal, you don't have as much land use. Yet that would be my recommendation, and would be my recommendation for Teal to start drawing that up. We are kind of way behind the 8 ball. The tower, you are doing that, isn't that correct? That the tower drawings are coming up together. We should start drawing up this terminal, and the terminal I think should be 3 stories with a basement that's hollowed out, and that should be underground parking. It takes up less of the land. That's the first part. Second part is, what do you do with all the dirt you take out to make a subterranean parking lot? You put it at the end of the runways, because according to the master plan, these are supposed to be increased 700. I think it's 754 feet each end. So that's where the dirt would go. And it makes sense to put it right there because you can get to it from Lancaster. So I don't know about the price. I think I'd offer them something much lower than what the current people are asking. All I can do is say no.
So the problem is when we do land acquisitions, we follow the federal rules, federal guidelines. The way that works is we do an appraisal that's done by a federally licensed, a federally accepted appraiser. There's only, I think, 3 now in the region. And what we do is the lowest the FAA will go is appraised value that they determine there. And for an example, we just did some appraisals where the gun club is because we're trying to get them to market rate. Those appraisals came back at $2.95 per square foot, which is $130,000 give or take per acre. We also
They have how many acres?
36 acres.
Okay.
Also, City of Hayden is looking to purchase out some property from Ramsey Road. Some of those appraisals came in very much in line with that. There's one that was even higher than that, and it was, so.
Well, I understand Kootenai Electric is building a big plant raft, so they're gonna move off this property right here at the end.
The county already owns that.
Oh, it does. I didn't.
The county's going to expand offices in Florida.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Well, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Yes, sir, Mr. Anderson.
I promised less than 3 minutes, but I'm gonna have to work to get that in now. Greg, I wanted to thank you for opening and closing with the solution to try to get committees together where we can talk as equals to each other. I think part of the frustration we've had in the past is there's a real power imbalance when we come into an advisory board meeting, a BOCC meeting, or even meeting with the airport director. That if we're in a situation where we can all talk and listen to each other as equals, I think that it would promote understanding. So I want to commend you for that. And I think that's a big step forward. So, you know, I'm trying, believe me, Stephen, I appreciate you getting together with me, and I tried to communicate what you did, what you told me as clearly as what you did, but there's some complex issues here.
Yeah.
And we've got some complex documents, and I don't know if all of you all have read the rules and standards. If you've gone through those line by line and read those, you should if you haven't. If you haven't gone through the airport master plan, that's an exercise that I hope you take on as well. And believe me, you may need to sit down with your attorney and read through it, because there's things that are complex in there, and there's things that seem to be contradictory. If you read down to the final proposal, which I understand now is the proposal 2-R is the one that's proposed. Now, one of the things I stumbled upon today was, by the way, you all have proposed to the county that they fund a preliminary tower study here. And one of the things one of the reasons that we're decoupling 220 from 624 is because there's specific language in there when they're discussing the alternatives. It says the FAA would prefer that if there's no tower, that the runways be decoupled. Now, if we're in the process of thinking about doing a tower and still going ahead with decoupling, it seems to me that opens the door to talk with them about what would happen if we had a tower here. I mean, that occurs to me as something that ought to be clearly discussed. And maybe that's for one of the discussion groups.
Yeah, that is for the group, because I can push back a little bit on that now too, but yeah, I don't want to debate you today.
Yeah.
Because I think the rules changed since the master plan got done.
Well,
They've changed a little bit for that specific item. I'm guessing the FAA would say something along the lines of, we don't have a tower today. We want our rules followed.
But that to me, puts the cart before the horse. If I thought I was gonna do something like that, I'd want to discuss it. So anyway, I'm not trying to discuss that now.
Yep.
The vector proposal, I think, I wasn't aware that there were landing fees here currently. I mean, but one of the things that our group talked about was that if you have a rule or a charge for aircraft over 8,000 pounds gross that are not here, that is discriminatory. Now, I don't know that that would be something that would be brought up, but it would certainly seem to be something that the people that are coming in here would say, well, why are you charging me when you're not charging the other tenants that are here and they're doing that? And the final thing that I wanted to mention is Stephen brought up the CPI. Everyone's talking about inflation. Everyone knows what's going on right now. It's crazy. And as far as the documents you gotta also familiarize yourself with is the current leases. And the last time I looked at the lease agreements for ground fees and whatever, there's a deal to keep the rates current. But CPI is one of the options that I remember, but it's not the only one. And it seems to be pretty broad what the discretion of the airport is to do it. So I would hope that there's not a 7% increase in lease fees for the next time a contract is real. Anyway, the final thing is the FARs are, Stephen is familiar with the FARs, the consultants are familiar with the FARs, the people who put together the master plan hopefully are familiar with it. But to my knowledge, when it looks like there's things that are contradictory in there, I think it would be money well spent by the county to hire an expert consultant to review the documents that are put together by the primary consultant and see, does this mesh up? Does this look right? Because you all are not going to go in and argue with the consultant and say, well, this is not right. But another consultant that's on equal footing, that's hired specifically to do that, I think could get rid of some of the confusion that we've lived with. So anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I hope that was under 3 minutes.
Well, yeah, whatever, but yeah, that's fine, Steve. But the other thing I'd encourage you, everybody here, including myself, is that the master plan is going to be looked at again in how many years?
So 2027, 2028, it'll be a new one.
Okay, so that's a lot.
It's 5 years, which isn't that long in airports. So.
But you asked for volunteers, right? I know I stayed away from it as far as I could, but maybe that's an opportunity for some of us to get involved.
I hope so. Anyway, I didn't mean to take the.
No, that was fine, Steve. Thank you for your comments. Yes, sir, Mike.
Speaking on behalf of being a hangar owner and owning a hangar that contains a private restroom facility. I mean, it's no secret that sewer rates have gone up quite a bit. I mean, when I built the hangar in 05, sewer rates were $25, and now what are they, Linda?
50.
Okay, and then there's a rumor that they're going to go up to 60. And I don't want to debate how we got there. All I know is I saw a letter that came to one of the tenants that said it's projected that based on your water usage, which seems to be erroneous, your sewer rate in 2024 will be $169 a month, which seems a bit ridiculous. And so, this talk about porta potties. I did some construction out of my ranch. I built a hangar out there for a heliport, and I was paying like $25 a month for a porta potty. I don't know what the current going rate is. I don't know if CPI affects that or anything. But so it appears that maybe at some point in the future, you might have a problem with people wanting to disconnect from the sewer and just put a porta potty outside. I talked to Panhandle Health about that, and they said that's fine. I know it's not rocket science to shut it off, but it gets to the point where the rates become untenable as far as what you're paying, no matter how they're calculated. And people just say, I want to shut off. And I know there's a porta potty over on, what is that, Delta 4? On that row of the Van Sky hangars.
Well, that's their port.
And that's a community porta potty. So I mean, you run the risk as rates go up, of people wanting to find a way to disconnect from the system and just operate a porta potty.
So Mike, we worked really hard about keeping most of the tenants at free WUs, which is a minimum charge. The ones that are not, or higher, that's based upon their actual water usage from Avondale Water. That is their usage for 6 months of the winter time. It's, if there's a leak or something, then that's why we sent those letters out. We sent multiple letters out to multiple individuals saying, there's a problem here. Are you gonna, do you want to address it or not? And most of them just chose not to do anything. So if that person chooses not to do anything, their water usage is what we're basing it upon, which is the fairest way we can find, is their actual water usage. And it's the averaging of each month over the 6-month period. I don't know how else to be fair.
So I understand that there's a leak and there's excessive water usage. I didn't get a letter, so I have no problem with that. But I see that as we've gone along, the rate increase has been huge, percentage wise. And I understand why. But if that continues in that direction, I mean, where's the threshold of pain for most people? If I can get a porta potty for $25 and you're charging me 70 or 80 or 90 bucks a month for sewer, where I don't understand the RUs, because honestly, for the time that at my hangar, I mean, I'm working out to like $5 a flush, okay, which doesn't seem very fair.
To be honest, Mike, well, you should, really what you're supporting me and trying to get rid of the system.
Well, I agree. And how quickly can we do that?
I have tried for, since I got here to be, why am I responsible for this?
Brett won't buy it.
Well, I'll give it to him.
We won't buy it.
I'll hand it to him for free.
We are trying to take over from the district. The district's the one, and it's the county we'd love to.
And I know Leslie Duncan, I had a conversation with her and she said it's 1.5 years out and you know, how much is it gonna go up in 1.5 years? Probably not much. So eventually we may arrive at a solution.
We aren't planning on raising the rates, so they're there. We are planning that, the only people that probably will see a rate change are the people that, we did a step program into place that to match their water usage. And every year, we're gonna review that, and if it goes down over that 4 or 5 year period of saying that average, we're gonna adjust it down too.
Okay, so it can be protested for the people that think they're being charged exorbitant rate, it can be protested and you can but how would you go about, if you gotta wait a whole nother year to go through a winter season to find out where?
So we've had people come in that have said, they've showed us bills and things of, people that have done, they had construction work done, that there was a leak on the exterior, it wasn't going into our system, that kind of stuff. We've done that to 3 or 4 of them. We've lowered the rates. They're not going to 3, but we're still lowering the rates to be fair to them and to match it. And we're saying, well, whenever the next rate adjustment is, as long as the rates stay down, your water usage stays down, it goes back to 3.
So I guess the answer is just to be patient and find out if you guys are gonna buy the system.
Yeah, well, okay, so this is a great conversation for a committee.
Yes.
And I will say that I know that Brett Travis, who is Gossip Hanger, paid this first month bill, didn't figure out what was going on. He called me up and said, call Linda. He knew he had a leak and they took care of it for him. So, okay. Is there any more?
Thanks.
Oh, I can just add that the
Or Louis
county
can.
pays $84 a month for the porta potties, for each porta potty on the ramps.
Okay.
That's what we pay for in our parks, $85.
Okay.
Or if it's handicap.
Any other public comment?
There's nothing on the chat.
Call, well, thank you. Call for adjournment.
I'm moving the adjournment.
Second that. Adjourned. Thank you for your time.
I didn't think that was harder.